Ladies and gentlemen, are we ready to start? Can I call the meeting to order? Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, Honorable Minister. Very happy to have everyone here this morning. I would imagine that those sitting in the room are as passionate about Assakuda trace facilitation and single windows as the members of the panel. But to start us off, I just wanted to make sure that we were all on the same page with respect to what it was that we were talking about, because there are different definitions of what we consider to be a single window, what we consider to be, trade facilitation. So, there is a definition which says a single window for trade is a facilitation instrument designed to substantially simplify, standardize, integrate, coordinate, and automate the exchange of regulatory information and documentation between traders and the multitude of partners, government agencies involved in controlling the movement of goods across borders. UNECE, who I think is one of the pioneers in working in this particular area, defines a single window as a facility providing trade facilitation that allows parties involved in trade and transport to lodge and standardize information and documents with a single entry point to fulfill all imports, exports, and transit-related regulatory requirements. The WCO has, I believe, a slightly wider view and believes that the single window can also be viewed as a network of cooperating facilities that are bound by trust and a set of agreed interface specifications in which trade has seamlessly access to regulatory services delivered through electronic means. So I think, whichever way we think about this, whether it is a single platform, whether it is a network, however we view it, most of us are engaged because we believe that eventually it reduces the time and cost of conducting business. It certainly simplifies the procedures with respect to the users, the reduction of paperwork, and I think that we all have been known to waste a lot of time running from place to place. Increased predictability and transparency, which is great when we think about the issue of corruption or potential corruption, whether that corruption is a facilitatory payment or whether it is someone trying to, have benefits for themselves personally. But it's important that everybody have access to a platform which is easy to use and which at the end of the day is important for trade. And of course, from a government perspective, they like to see the reduction in cost, enhanced facilitatory and regulatory processes, elimination of duplicated processes between agencies, higher compliance levels with government regulations, and enhanced traceability and statistics, all of which are going to increase the economic competitiveness of our countries. Now, what we're dealing with today is Article 10.4 of the WTO, the Trade Facilitation Agreement. And, this is a somewhat voluntary agreement. Members shall endeavor to establish or maintain a single window, enabling traders to submit documents and or data requirements for importation, exportation, or transit of goods through a single entry point to the participating authorities or agencies. After the examination by the participants, authorities, or agencies of the documentation or data, the results shall be notified to the applicant through a single window in a timely manner. So it says, shall endeavor to. But I think that most members understood what this could deliver for them, and I think most members are trying to implement, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. Today we're going to be hearing from our panel, which where we start with the Minister of Finance, the Honorable Ryan Strawn from Barbados here. Then we will move to Shamika, who is the Director of the Division of Technology and Logistics at UNCTAD. And then finally to Owen Holder, who is the Controller of the Customs and Excise Department. And, you know, I think we'll have a number of perspectives as to what the intention was of the WTO Trade Facilitation Agreement, what the reality is on the ground, and also what it is that we expect to gain at the end of the day. So, Minister, could you, of course, describe from a ministry's perspective, you have to support the sponsorship of the digital transformation of Customs and Excise Department. What was it that caused you to jump onto this and to support this initiative going forward?
Thank you so very much, Patricia. Good morning, fellow panelists. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, let me formally thank UNCTAD for the support it has given to Barbados in this endeavor in the last 6 years, but certainly before that as well. And just a little bit of perspective, because when we came to office just about 6 years ago, the upgrade to Secure the World from Plus Plus was delayed by almost 6 years at that particular point in time. And therefore, as I toured the various customs facilities, I noticed that there was a lot of paper in almost every, whether it's the British port and the various off-site areas, lots of paper, lots of inefficiency, which also contributed to air quality issues with some of the areas, because obviously paper collects dust, and those things actually did not make sense. So part of the mandate was to modernize and digitize the country, of which obviously the government was a critical stakeholder. So I met with not just the Customs Department, but all of the interested parties to indicate, as we did with UNCTAD, that we were going to implement Secure the World within a 6-month period. And therefore we set about in a very focused way on every week making sure that happened. Now, that was the picture then, so therefore the focus was how to get this thing implemented. One of the things that we in hindsight, we recognized that what we should have done then was to make sure that all of the other government agencies were on a similar timeline for upgrade, because having done the successful implementation with customs, we then realized very quickly that the other agencies also needed a similar push from not just resources, but IT and a whole range of areas to be able to deliver. But I must say that work was critical to be done in September of 2019. And whilst we closed off Plus Plus and turned on Secure the World, because people were saying to us we should run a pilot, and I said, well, after 6 years of delay, we're not piloting anything, we're doing this. And therefore, we are going to make the change. Now, naturally, if you're accustomed to one system, as you transition to another, the usual teething issues arose, and therefore the initial feedback was positive to some degree, but obviously there were a lot of issues in people just getting accustomed to it. Now, fast forward 6 months when COVID hit in March of 2020. The private sector then recognized that the wisdom of why we needed to push, and we didn't know, obviously, that COVID was coming in 2019, but the ability now to be able to clear goods online was particularly important in March of 2020, especially when the country closed down, and therefore we had the mechanism in place then to be able to facilitate trade. So that helped to solve some critical challenges that we had, because I cannot imagine us being able to do it with having to use all that paper when you were trying to social distance and all these things there. So that was a critical intervention. So we then quickly turned our gears, if you like, to the single window. And we were having some issues with that particular project as well. And so in discussion with the controller, we approached UNCTAD and we said, look, the same way that you've delivered a secure world for us, we want UNCTAD to come in and help build out the framework for the single window. And yes, that was in the middle of the pandemic, had a few issues with getting people in and all of that, but we set about a path now to make sure that the single window for the country now can be implemented where the OG is, and those are on a similar platform to customs, to really ensure that the ease with which we can actually do business and use more data, more risk management as part of our procedures actually makes more sense and is critical really for the region as we want to position Barbados as a logistics hub, to be able to leverage not just the data, but the intelligence. And I think part of what we have seen with the introduction of a secure world and what we want to be able to build out in the single window framework is really to develop the data intelligence, the business intelligence around how we how we trade, what we trade, and therefore as we focus on improving the export potential out of Barbados, it's going to be important to have that platform. Sorry, excuse me, to have that platform in place in order for us to be able to assess how effective our policy interventions actually have been. Now, I see our partners here for the Bridgetown Port, tremendously strategic, as you would appreciate, in terms of providing the necessary support to be able to derive a lot of the support and innovation within this space. So the port has launched their maritime single window, and we're all working collaboratively to be able to ensure that customs and the port move together. And by the same token, bringing the other OGAs along with that specific mission of being able to not just lower the cost of doing transactions, but to do more business in the country. And therefore repositioning Barbados then really as a logistics hub. And I'm saying this from the perspective that, yes, the port is doing their part, the Bridgetown Port, at the Grant Adams International Airport as well. We are doing some upgrades up there to make sure that in relation to air cargo and the like, that we can utilize the existing capacity to be able to help generate more business for us. So I think over the last few years, we're reasonably satisfied that we've made some progress, but we now need to make sure that our private sector now fully appreciates the strength of the logistics supply chain and what is possible. Now, just very quickly, during the pandemic, of course, or let me say before the pandemic, people would go away and shop, bring back stuff, they would do all of those things. We've seen in the middle of the pandemic, people then shifted to online. And we saw a proliferation of cargo coming in at the airport in a way that exploded because you couldn't go anywhere. So therefore, you needed to be able to get stuff in. And that's worked reasonably well. So we've seen now in an area where a lot of small companies have popped up to facilitate bringing stuff in for people, which is great. And it's something that we thought would abate once the pandemic subsided, but it seemingly has not. So this area of logistics has the opportunity to deliver not just better pricing for consumers and the like, notwithstanding the global challenges, but the opportunities for persons to actually participate in making the economy work is significant. And therefore, I'm happy to say that we are prepared to be a first mover with the upgrade to Asicuda 5, which will make it possible for people to do stuff now on their mobile phones, because we have to push the boundaries with respect to how we're able to leverage. So you heard the Prime Minister speak yesterday about a region being able to utilize the global supply chain as a mechanism for creating intergenerational wealth. And therefore, we see the single window not just as a mechanism for collecting taxes at the border, which we must do. It's important to regulate what is coming in, not just Barbados, but the region, and share that information. We're committed to doing that. But what we want to be able to see is that align with that, as we've put in place the digital payments platforms to leverage the e-commerce capability and allow people from the region to use the global supply chain to be able to export and do it with strength, right here within the region. And we hope that Barbados, working alongside the other members across CARICOM, that not just the logistics, but the monetary system, the payment platforms, all of that being leveraged is really what we can create effectively our own version of Amazon. And I say that from the perspective that once the region understands that we can scale up using our capabilities, then any citizen, any part of this region will be able to drive trade and use the data, use the infrastructure that we already have to be able to make a significant difference, not just in their lives, but in the lives of the citizens across the region. So Barbados is fully committed to this exercise, one, as a mechanism not just for efficiency from the tax side, but as I said, to be able to enfranchise as many people, and therefore the conversation around logistics now has to be cast wider to the ordinary person in our communities for them to recognize that they too are part of the global logistics supply chain framework, and these interventions are critical for helping build resilience, economic resilience in not just the supply chain itself, but economic resilience within communities and households across the region. So I'll stop there, but I think we have what it takes to collaborate regionally in order to make this happen. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Minister. I would probably suggest to UNCTAD that they capture Minister and take him around to evangelize other ministers about what this process can deliver. So, Minister, as a takeaway from your presentation and your input, that's my first suggestion to UNCTAD. And, I would love to invite you to Jamaica and certainly wish to work with you on, evangelizing the region as to how we can really make this system work for us. And I think that yesterday we talked about partnerships. That was one of the things that came out of the discussions yesterday. Partnerships, critical and important, and I think it's going to take partnerships in this region in order to make us, take that leapfrog movement and to move further on. But I think to show us what could possibly happen, I think, Sharika, you can give us a perspective of what is possible and what UNCTAD has down the pipeline for us.
Thank you so much, Patricia. Good morning to everyone, and it's great to be here with the two of you. You also have championed. You brought the private sector into Jamaica's single window process, and as the minister has said, that his effort to bring the whole country together to go on this journey. So it's extremely important to have this sort of leadership, because the single window they are not easy reforms. Because if you automate customs, it's under the finance ministry, there's a customs agency, they have funds, they're capable, they have skills, they have equipment, you just go and automate. But this is it's a whole of government approach. You need to bring all governments together. And these are big ministries. You have the finance ministry doing the customs, you have the transport, you have the trade ministry, these are like big ego ministries. So you try to coordinate them. It's not an easy endeavor. So this is why, we can bring the technology, we can be there to build skills, but the success very much depends on the conditions on the ground. So this is the first thing I want to say. Now let me tell you a bit about ASICUDA. ASICUDA is a rare UN program. It's a technology transfer program. Remember, I don't know whether you know about UNCTAD. UNCTAD was created in 1964 by developing countries. It's the only UN agency that's been created by developing countries for developing countries. And the intention, the objective is quite sad when you read the 1964 declaration. It is to bring developing countries to engage in the global economy in a fair and equitable manner. So that is an unfinished business. Yes. And this is our job. So you see, so in that sense, it's it's an end-to-end technology transfer program. We bring this massive, comprehensive digital platforms. We sit down with experts and train them on software development, and then we sit with the countries and adapt the system, so it's not a one-size-fits-all. It's adapt the system to countries' needs, because they're all very different. And then at the end of the day, we also hand over the source code. So the technology is yours, and it is not ours. So that's the, I mean, honestly, if you're a private sector, if I'm a private sector, I wouldn't do that now, because that cannot be done, because that's not the business model. But for the UN agency, we can do that. So that's what we have been doing. You see, we are in 102 countries now, starting the customs automation, 102 countries and territories. As you can see, the 38, them are LDCs, and 23 LLDC, and the 41 SIDS. So that's the whole customs automation. And we also have 13 countries we have developed or in the process of completing or developing single window programs, like in Jamaica and in Barbados. And in the SIDS, so it's the Barbados, Jamaica, St. Vincent, and the Grenadines, Vanuatu, Comoros, Timor-Leste, we are developing single window systems. Now, you see, I think one thing that works for us, let me say that before that, after doing these 13 single windows, we said, okay, let's sit down and see what works and what doesn't work. So we got my colleagues working all across the world to write this report. The report is there, please pick up a copy. It's a roadmap for building a trade single window. It's a practical aspect, not the theoretical aspect of single window. What works and what doesn't work, what are the key ingredients and what are the steps that's needed. So this is all here. And in fact, it's one of the favorite parts for me is there is a box in page 15, it's a text box. It's called What Not to Do When Developing an Electronic Single Window. I think that's extremely important to read. Yes. This box, because you should not go there and if you don't have the right ingredients. So let me say a few things. You see, when ASICUDA come to a country, because we are a UN agency, we are your agency. So we are basically a partner. It's a partnership for us. And working with the governments, recognizing your priorities, recognizing your needs, and then when we support you to develop a single window, we are very clear that you should not go on a big bang manner. And that's number one for failure. You should go step by step. And it's extremely important to get the customs automated, because if the customs is not on board or customs is not automated, you will not have a single window. It's very simple, because customs handles about 70% of trade procedures. So they need to be on board, and they are the easiest, I don't know, in our opinion, they are the easiest to automate in a way, because the customs has the IT departments. I mean, very few government agencies have IT departments wherever I travel. I go to talk to agriculture ministries, and they said we don't have any IT capabilities, we don't have IT capacity, the veterinary people and the wildlife conservation people, there's no ability. So they have the IT capabilities, they have the most, up-to-date equipment. So it's a good endeavor to begin with customs. So it's a step-by-step approach, not to automate everything, and because we will fail. And I think we also have, we do 3 approaches. We build the single window from scratch. Some countries, we have built single windows starting from the beginning. Everything is, developed starting from the customs automations and so forth. Or we interface with the systems already developed, because, no need to waste. If the systems are already developed and the systems are aligned with international standards. Now, this is important. Because the single window of UNCTAD it's complied with the international standards. So we will look into the governmental agencies, and if the standards are the same international standards, it's very easy to interface with the single window. Or we also provide web-based portal to government agencies. You sit there and develop this web-based portal so that the single window can be connected. So as I said, ASICUDA is a compliance catalyst, because through its network of cooperation in international organizations, World Customs Organization, WTO, UPU, IMO, and the regional entities, the ASEAN, CARICOM, COMESA, ECOWAS, EU, and so forth, and also the trade agencies like the IATA, IRU, and we ensure the systems are aligned with and recognized by international and regional standards and agreements. In fact, this publication that we just put it out, and it is also, I think, WCO is using. It's to update the single window compendium of WCO. So, because it's that compatibility. Now, the other thing I want to say is that, we are a sustainable partner, meaning we just don't disappear. We will sit in Geneva, you will always know we don't go bankrupt, we don't disappear in the night. You can always send an email or an angry telephone call. We are there for you. So we are sustainable. Because it's a technical cooperation program for us. And in fact, ASICUDA is the largest technical cooperation program of UNCTAD. And when we are partnering with countries, we partner for the long haul. So this is something I want to let you know. Now, let me go back a bit. I think, Minister, you mentioned e-commerce, because this is the new advent of trade. This is an area of trade that's growing much faster than the goods trade, the e-commerce. So the ASICUDA also has components to bring e-commerce on board, especially the small parcels coming through the post offices. The post offices are inundated with these parcels. They don't know what's coming. There's no risk assessment management system. In many countries I have been there, the ministers tell me, we are so nervous because the drugs comes through, expensive telephones, iPhones come through little parcels, they are not being taxed because they are all put in a big bag and taken out of the customs, the post office stuff. Yeah. They are not going through the risk assessment. They are just put on a big bag and taken to the post offices. And there are all kinds of medicines that's been expired, and they also come. So this is a real concern. So we work with UPU, for example, to connect the post offices and to develop the risk management systems. And the new thing is the whole maritime transport. The whole, how do we make sure that the bill of lading is already automated, and before the ships arrive, everything is clear, the risk assessment functions are in place. And so those are the things that we do, because there are new functions, and those new functions we are doing. We have a program called ASIHub Maritime, and it is piloted in Cambodia and Sri Lanka, and being implemented in Albania, Jordan, and Venezuela. And we started with the GIZ, the German agency, and piloted in Sri Lanka and Cambodia, now ready to roll out. So finally, let me go back and tell that, just to emphasize, because it's a single window, it's a whole of government approach, and they are not easy. Whenever there is a whole of government approach, bringing government, coordinating one ministry with the other ministry is very, very difficult. We did the very first single window we have done was in Rwanda, and it was success depended very much on the President Kagame, because he announced he wants the digital, Rwanda to be digital, number one. And he told the whole trade community he wants to see a single window in place. And it happened. So it's just that strong leadership and vision and bringer of everyone together. Like, for example, Singapore was one of the early adopters of single window, and it was because the trade minister at that time was a very visionary leader, and also happened to be the father was the prime minister, Lee Kuan Yew. So it was that combination worked. So it's very important to have that bring the whole of government approach. And so this is why we want to have the leaders like our minister here to evangelize this endeavor, because because we can go and say stuff, but it's when they hear from the real practitioners how a leadership has taken it forward, and these are important. And as I said, just to summarize, the customs automation is key. If the customs is not automated, you will not have a single window. So that's the numero uno. It has to be done. 70% is customs. And the step-by-step approach is very important. And Patricia, let me say here, I think there's a private sector involvement is extremely important. If you get the private sector on board, and many times we see private sector can move the governments, The governments listen. They may not listen to each other, but they do listen to private sector, because private sector has a voice. in bringing things forward. So I want to thank you, Patricia, because I remember when we started the single window project, very early stages in Jamaica, and you brought the private sector through the National Trade Facilitation Committee that you had. And you had a steering committee, the private sector came, and the private sector had lots of questions saying, oh, what is this? Is this another barrier to us? Are there going to be many more hurdles, many more procedures? And that ironing out of the private sector, I think got the private sector on board to have a single window. So I just want to put that. And please take a look at this publication, because there's no theory in it, because ASICUDA they're all practitioners. So this is a book of practitioners, and it will be very helpful to you. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Shamika. Some important lessons that you have made there, important points, the fact that customs has to be the lead in all of this. And
No, can I just change it?
yes, of course.
It's not, I don't think, because when you say customs leads, people,
Well,
they get scared.
stop,
Customs,
stop.
exactly.
Stop.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Let me change. Let me change, because I think we suffer from that too. It has to be.
Also because the finance ministry is a big boy, yeah? So
Yes.
when they come to the room, everybody's like, oh my God, these guys are here.
Yes, so we want to see customs up front, being the first start, and then bringing everyone else on board. And as you say, this is like herding cats, because there are so many vested interests in keeping the status quo, and it's a big change management type of issue. And change management, as you all know, is something which is very difficult. I mean, in your own personal life, I know I've been on a diet for I don't know how many years, and I haven't actually lost any weight. So, I obviously have moved from the theory of losing weight to the actual practice of losing weight. So the change is difficult, whether it's in your personal life or it is about the business that you're in. And of course, the incentive to change is something which is critical and important. And I think when you have the Customs and Excise Department that understands what this means in actual fact, that takes you in a long way to understanding what next and how that will move forward. So we have Owen Holder, who has been a mentor for us in Jamaica. He comes to Jamaica and has been helping us to change the behavior of our people and to expose them to other kinds of thinking. So I think, Owen, I'd like to ask you about the strategic vision for Customs and Excise Department and your ongoing digital transformation, because you have been doing this now for some time, and you have significant experience not only here but right across the region. So let's hear from you some ideas.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning to all. And you would have heard the minister, and when you work with a minister, and this is my secret, right? So I'm letting you all know. When you work with a minister who is so engaged and who can understand the digital process, it creates a kind of pressure on you to produce. And the minister is always in my ear in relation to what we're doing. And clearly, you can't fabricate a story. So you have to do one thing and one thing only, and that is produce. And therefore, we in the Customs Department have sought to push the organization as far forward as possible down the line of digitization, and having that view to make sure that the organization is well positioned to do what is required to do in trade facilitation and the clearance of goods. And the minister would have spoken about the implementation of ASICUDA World and the immediate follow-up of COVID. And I remember having discussions with BPI, my partner, critical partner in this process. And we were able to develop a process in a matter of days that would have allowed the non-contact of importers of goods, yet still allowing the clearance of that goods in a short space of time. And we could only have done that if, first of all, we have implemented Access to the World, but also we have also implemented a process where the two systems, Port Authority and Customs systems, were linked electronically to facilitate a process from the beginning to the end without persons having to come into the harbor to do that clearance of goods. So that in a nutshell was one of the things that we did to make sure that digitization was part of the process. But we operate in an environment where we have Port Authority on one side, we have the OGAs on another side, and we have the couriers on the other side. And right in the middle of there is customs. And for customs really to satisfy those three groupings, or if you want to call it that, their desire to facilitate the clearance of goods, digitization becomes critical. Minister, you may not know this, but the courier goods importation has increased by more than 50% in our last estimation. And on a monthly basis, we receive applications for couriers to work in importing goods. Actually, there's one transit shed, and I don't want to call that transit shed, who is now bursting at the seams, where we cannot even accommodate another person in that facility, another courier in that facility. This shows the volume of increase of imports in that area, but also there has to be something good happening in the courier industry that has resulted or resulting in those persons want to get into that market. So what customs should do? We intend to carry the digitization process forward to maximize all trade activities. So all of the customs processes will be automated, and we have started that process, but we have to include things like enforcement activities, critical to the process. We have to bring along, my friend, the OGAs, and we see we have a representative of the OGA here, which is critical. Minister and Andreen, you said that the OGAs are critical, and we must bring them along. We have no choice. We have started to bring them along. We have currently in the system the Department of Commerce and Consumer Affairs, Port Health, Plant Quarantine, Veterinary Services, and all of them are in the system to clear goods. We have applications from persons like the Drug Service and other agencies that want to get into Access to the World. And we are going to provide that process. I can say that the OGAs being in currently clearing goods in Access to the World has improved the clearance process. And I see one of my cameras shaking his head. They have improved the clearance process. But one thing that we must bear in mind is that customs, prior to automation, had to take the licks for not clearing goods. But now, with the bringing the OGAs into the system, what we can do, we can look at the footprint in Access to the World, and we can say, not customs, Port Authority, sorry, not Port Authority, not you, Port Authority, you're always that friend, Port Health, the Department of Commerce and Consumer Affairs, or the other agencies, Plant Quarantine, is the holdup. So automation is the process going forward. It must go forward, and we intend to carry it as far possible forward. And in that automation, you will get digitalization, right, which will be captured in Access to the World and in the single window. Access to the World will form a critical part of the single window, and also all of the other customs processes will form part of the electronic single window, so that at the end of the day, all activities will be in a secure world. Just one other point, we cannot but go forward with the digitalization process because the increase in the volume of trade have shown, and the increase in the volume of trade and the lag with the human resources, I need to say this, makes it necessary for us to do digitization and automation. And that will facilitate, one, the clearance of goods. And Andrew, you might not know this, but Minister will know this. And I'm not so sure if the audience will know, but I'm saying now, currently we clear approximately 80% of our cargo through the Green Lane. And that is through a selectivity engine in our secure world that allow us to do that. If we didn't have that engine, we would not be able to do that. And we have also even gone further by implementing the Trusted Trader program. And in that Trusted Trader program, we are currently at, in some cases, 85% green, 10% red, 5% yellow. And others, we are at 90% green, 5% yellow, and 5% red. And all of that has been facilitated through automation and the use of the risk management engine and our secure world, which we do on a daily basis. We've actually implemented the unit to do that whole risk management process, and they manage all activities, they highlight issues, and they are managed accordingly. So yes, at the end of the day, we hope that we are looking to digitize all customs processes, but in the meantime, we are going to provide a facility to bring along the other government agencies to ensure that we don't have a bottleneck creating with customs being out front with the implementation while the OGS are lagging behind. I thank you.
Thank you very much. Owen, you spoke about how risk management is allowing you to be far more selective in the way that you conduct business. Minister, you talked about the intelligence, gathering of intelligence, which is not only intelligence which allows Owen to do his work in a more strategic way, but intelligence in order to understand what is actually happening in the economy, what goods are coming through, where opportunities exist. So you're using it as an economic tool to be able to move your economy forward and to look at new opportunities. We have approximately 15 minutes, and I thought when we started this, that it would be important for us to have a level of interaction, because this is something, the opportunity to talk to a minister who is an evangelist on this issue is not always, somebody might want to know, how do I talk to my minister and get my minister on board? What was it that caused you, minister, to become a believer? That would be my question to you. But let's open it up. There's in the back, Tropical Shipping. Introduce yourself and
My name is Jared Regas. I work for Tropical Shipping. And I wanted to ask you a question, actually. I noticed one of the early slides, you put up all the 13 countries where you had single windows. Can everybody hear me? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, you had 13 countries where single windows had been implemented. And one of those 13 countries was Jamaica. I know Jamaica has another single window program that was implemented by a French company called Soger. So I need to understand, I'm a little
a support
confused.
community system.
I need to understand what the scope of the single window was in Jamaica with respect to Soger, because I think, Pat, you started off at a very good point by trying to define single windows, and that definition always seems to be a bit blurry, and the boundaries of that single window always seem to be a bit fuzzy. So I need to get a clearer understanding of where the Asacuda-based single window ends and where the
Okay. I'm going to take a couple more questions before we answer that so that we have a more comprehensive response. Any other questions? At the very back. Identify yourself, please, and then.
My name is Raj Mawdia from the General Secretary of the Indian Ocean Commission. Just one question of clarification. I understand that the IMO has already not just proposed, but apparently it's even decided that from January this year, that the single window IMO should already be operational. What could be the link between these two different types of tools?
Okay. Anyone else? I think there was a gentleman here first, and then to you.
Yeah, thank you. My name's Chris Thibodeau. I'm with Adaptable Group now. Just adding on to the same question over there. Just wondering what the panel feels about more logistics-related single windows. My understanding is SOJET and other systems of that nature are more community systems.
Yeah.
So there's a single window for logistics.
Yeah.
And then you have a single window process for government, which my understanding would be associated with processing of controlled and regulated goods, licenses, permits, certificates, and other controls associated with controlled and regulated goods.
Yeah.
Just wondering what the panel's vision is in terms of how a port community system, logistics single window, and a government single window comes together in integration to create that national single window approach, perhaps.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And then finally.
My name is Iran, representing South Reports. Two questions. One is actually the exposing the source code. What are the challenges and the risk of exposing the source code? I mean, what could happen? Because actually, as far as I know, the SQDA is a rule-based system. So actually, if you give the source code to somebody to change the rules of the system, what would the risk? That's one. That's first question. The second would be now. Of course, we have the customs create a single window and ISO demand have single window. So what are the challenges of incorporating or integrating the both and actually having one system for actually both customs and maritime? So I mean, why they actually have two systems and just
Yeah. 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 Okay. I can answer most of that
Yes,
question,
please.
but Jaime, you are intimately engaged in the process in Jamaica. But basically, it is the SOJE project is a port community system, and it is very much linked to Asikuda World. And the IMO system we're just building now, and that is about the IMO regulations, whether the industry is following the IMO rules. And so, Jaime, I put you on the spot.
Thank you. I was supposed to be only assisting my boss, but I'm on the hot seat now. Thank you very much, Pat. Well, actually, we had that discussion while we were doing the implementation of Asikuda World in Jamaica. So we had these initiatives. Government wanted to have Jamaica as a trade hub, and that's still the pursuit that we're going. And the port community system, which is provided by this French company, SOJE, they are providing certain services, digital services that will assist with the movement of cargo and the operations at the terminal. So port operations and airport operations as well, movements that have to do with those who have a concession to operate a warehouse, a private warehouse, where goods will be moved from the port of entry, and that's where certain transactions take place that are intimately related with transactions that are done through Asikuda World. So we have interfaced both solutions to ensure that government, the other stakeholders that are trade operators, plus the traders also have the possibility to transact through the various options that both solutions provide. And the single window for trade is mainly allowing, again, the economic operators to apply for a license to import motor vehicles, an import permit for phytosanitary or veterinary products, any plant material or plants that will have to be exported from the country, the certification of origin, that's for CARICOM and all the other bilateral or multilateral agreements that the country may have. So those are the three initiatives that we have in Jamaica. And we also have it here in Barbados. There's a port community system. There's a maritime single window operated and developed by the Barbados Port Inc. The single window, which is developed by us, assisted by us with the Ministry of Energy and Business. And we have Secure World dealing with all the back office operations for customs. So those are more or less the boundaries that each of these solutions bring for government to improve the ease of business and also to ensure that they collect revenue for all the aspects that are required. I hope I was able to clarify.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, thanks very much. Jaime, I think you hit the nail on the head, but let me just respond to something that both Pat and your colleague indicated. When we were doing the legislation for the maritime single window and the port community system, we had just done the Customs Act, which says that all data must come to the Customs Department. So when you say that the Ministry of Finance turns up, people get all nervous. So to make this work, it meant that as the ships were arriving, they needed to be able to engage the port effectively in order for the process to come through. So they came and we met and we discussed it. They said, well, it's not a problem because the idea is to make sure that whatever the ecosystem of data exchange needs to be consistent so that wherever you hit it, the information is passed all the way through digitally. And therefore, it was easy for me to say, well, we will agree that the information will go there first and then be cascaded to customs as opposed to going the other way. So the collaboration was already there from what we had experienced during COVID, and therefore it just meant that we changed the regulation just to make sure that that can happen. So I think it's important, as you call me an evangelist, yes. to recognize that in order for these things to work, the various agencies must give up something in order for it to work. And therefore, that's why it's important that the data exchanges and the rules around that those are clear, and therefore allowing the entity, whoever that person is, to have the process built in the back end to be able to facilitate. And therefore, that's the perspective that I want to share, because without that change, it would have been stuck.
Yeah,
And therefore, we've seen some improvements, and therefore, as we bring other OGAs on board, they also equally need to be aware that as we build the data intelligence around everything that's there is going to be important. And just, I forgot to mention the artificial intelligence component, which is going to be key moving forward. And it's Owen reminded me of it when he indicated that we have a situation where a number of our officers in the Customs Department are going to retire within the next 2-3 years significantly. And so we've been trying to straddle the new recruitment with the introduction of new technology and being able to find the right skills to come in and be aligned with that. Because it's easy to go and say you want new customs officers, but if you're getting new customs officers without the right skills to be able to come into this space, then you will be defeating the purpose in relation to what you're trying to do moving forward. So we're trying to recruit actively new officers to be well positioned for age where a lot of the data intelligence that we are building and the introduction of artificial intelligence modules to be able to help focus what we're doing and then make sure that the compliance and the enforcement is there, which is where you need the human bodies really for. And therefore, that's the kind of context that we're trying to think. So I'll be happy to evangelize on on behalf of Asecuda, but because this is really going to be transformational for the region. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister. We had a question here about the risk of the open source. And Shamika, if you could perhaps respond to that. And I think there was one last question, and I think we're ready for the next panel, so we just have to close at that point.
Yeah. No, I think, because we are not a private operation and the UN operation, we do give the source code to the countries, so the countries own the technology, because that's the model. But we work with countries. We have agreements to protect the UN's property rights, so, the changes have to be agreed with us, when the source code is distributed to others.
Okay, and there was a gentleman in the gray shirt. Your question. Identify yourself and then ask question.
No, so as we were chatting, I got a message from my colleague who indicated that we'll be in a position to exchange the first set of information tomorrow on the single window. But the point you're making about the OG is, I'd indicated early in my presentation that this is an area for which, as we move to the next level of ASICUDA, ensuring that, and with the single window, that all of the agencies are resourced appropriately in order to make sure that we can meet the standards. So I did indicate that that was an issue that we faced when we did the implementation up to ASICUDA World. It's taken much longer than any of us would have liked, but it is being addressed. And to the point you made about leadership, the Prime Minister, working with Senior Minister Simmons as well as Minister Cummins, have been working with them, and I'm supporting to be able to make sure that whatever resources they have. But you spoke to change management, which is one of those areas that we continue to work through to ensure that we can make it. So will it happen overnight? We will make the interventions, but it's the change management that Patricia referred to that is key now to making sure that everything works as seamlessly as possible. Okay.
Well, thank you very much. I think we've started the process of looking from a policy level at a customs level and from UNCTAD's perspective to look at this whole issue. We're going to be starting a new panel now, which is more about the operations of how this is going to work. And so some of the questions that we spoke about, we'll actually highlight a little bit more about how those things work. But I want to thank the panel. Certainly, Minister, you're going to be hearing a lot more from UNCTAD, I'm sure, and you're going to be hearing from me in the Caribbean. And of course, Owen is someone who has been working in the Caribbean for quite some time, so we will all continue to engage with him also. And so thank you very much to UNCTAD. Thank you very much for beginning the day looking at some of the key issues which are important on the implementation of ASICUDA and single window. And we thank you, Minister, especially for your leadership, and look forward to working with you in the future and, of course, with UNCTAD. So thank you very much. A round of applause for the panel.